Hi, everyone. It is 12 on the dot, so I think we'll get started because I know that our panelists want as much time to share their information as possible. I'm really looking forward to our lunch and learn today and learning from all of our panelists about how they've managed transitions between different housing options, either for themselves or for members of their family. So my name is Beth, and I'm a co-chair for Age Friendly Edmonton's Aging in Place Hub. And so for those of you that don't know, Age Friendly Edmonton is a citywide initiative that seeks to build a city that values, respects, and actively supports the safety, diversity, and well-being of older adults in our community. So I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that we are located on Treaty 6 territory, which is a traditional gathering place for diverse Indigenous peoples, including the Cree, Blackfoot, Métis, Nakota Sioux, Iroquois, Dene, Ojibwe, Saulteaux, and Anishinaabe, as well as the Inuit and many others whose histories, languages, and cultures continue to influence our vibrant community. As a settler on this land, I recognize that I benefit from colonialist policies and that I have a duty to engage in the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I hope others also share that duty to engage in those actions as well. So I'll first introduce our moderator, Jolyn Hall. So Jolyn is the owner of Edmonton 55 and has been working with mature adults to discover the best housing choice that can meet their aging well goals and provide support on how to age well in their home and community. And our panelists, so we have four really great panelists here today. So first, Peter Faid. Peter is a retired social policy consultant who has exchanged his paid employment for a significant increase in volunteer work. So in 2007, he conducted a major study for the city of Edmonton on aging in place. And as a result of this professional work, he and his wife decided in 2009 to build an aging in place home on the edge of Mill Creek Ravine here in Edmonton. Our next panelist is Joan Eales. And so as an older person, Joan has moved twice, once from Dawson's Creek in northern BC to Victoria at the age of 69, and more recently from Victoria to Edmonton at the age of 84. She has considerable experience downsizing again and again. Her moving experiences range from abrupt to having a year to plan, and she's delighted to share her experience with others today. Our next panelist is Dale Blue. So Dale has a master's degree in occupational therapy from New York University, and this made his immigration in 1981 much easier and faster. So in Edmonton, he's worked for 20 years in long-term care, first at a private facility and the last 12 years at the Edmonton General. After retiring, he volunteered at the Edmonton Seniors Center. Working and volunteering, among other things, made him aware of the necessity of planning ahead, and he made a move last October. And our final panelist is Jeannette Sinclair. So Jeannette, along with her siblings, have been the primary caregivers of their 95-year-old mother, who was able to live in her own home with family and home care support until the severity of her health issues required hospitalization in August of this year. So after 18 days of care in the hospital, Jeannette's family were informed that they had to choose a long-term care facility for their mother within a few days, which created several challenges that they had to face in a short period of time. So these panelists are all really excited to share more about their stories and the challenges that they've experienced along the way. So for now, I'm going to turn it back to Jolyn, who will moderate our discussion today. So Jolyn, over to you.
Thank you so much, Beth, and welcome to not only our panelists, but everyone viewing from home. We thank you so much for joining us today. Aging in place is such an integral piece that all of us need to plan for. We can't magically snap our fingers and age for the rest of our life in our home without a little bit of work. And so today we're delighted that these four individuals have been, able to share their experiences so that hopefully there's a nugget you can take away to help you age well in your home, in your community, and keep your independence and safety for as long as possible. So today I'm going to be your moderator and introducing each of our panelists as we go through a series of questions so that they can share their experience. So we have a lot of information that we want to get through. So we're going to keep the conversation moving. If you have questions along the way, please type them into the chat box. and we'll do our best to answer as many questions at the end. So without delay, we are going to get started. So the first question we are going to start with is, for each of my panelists, what made you start or initiate the thought that you needed to make a move or something needed to happen? So for this first question, I'm going to start with Joan. Oh, Joan, you just muted yourself. There we go.
How's that? Thank you. As you can tell, I am new at this game, but I have got some things to share with you. I wanted to start with telling you about my grandfather, who came up with the definition of successful aging. It's a willingness to embrace change in all its facets. He was born in a thatched roof cottage in England in the 1880s, and together we sat and watched the first man land on the moon on TV, and the tears were streaming down his cheeks. He lived past 102 years. So I think that tells us something. My first major move occurred one day in August of 2006. I was 69 years old. I'd been a resident of Dawson Creek, a small rural city in northeastern British Columbia, for 44 years. I expected to live out my life there. However, in January of that year, I had sustained a compression fracture of my left leg and wore a leg brace, full leg brace, for 3 months. After its removal, I had 2 very painful knees, and the medical people could give me no assurance of improvement. I realized I had to leave Dawson Creek for a warmer climate before the snow came, as I could not manage uneven surfaces and stairs. I called a realtor, flew to Victoria, purchased a townhouse all in one level, hired a moving company, and within 8 weeks, the movers left me in Victoria with 425 boxes in my double garage. Time passed, and in 2019, I was now 82 years old with no family support in Victoria. It was time for another move. This time to Edmonton, Alberta, where my daughter and her family live. And then COVID arrived. I adapted to self-isolation in Victoria, but knew that I needed to relocate to Edmonton for better social support. With my daughter, a local realtor, and FaceTime, we found a condo close to my daughter that was a good size and a layout that would meet my future needs. So I cobbled together the funds to purchase it. Reluctant to move during the COVID pandemic, I spent the next year sifting through and downsizing my belongings and packing and storing boxes in my garage again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joan. I'm going to ask for Peter to unmute and share his story about what made him start his plans with his house.
Well, thank you very much, Jolene. I appreciate the opportunity to share my story. There are 2 streams to my story, one personal and one professional, and they merged and allowed me to do a lot of research at someone else's expense on the value of looking at aging in place. My wife and I had built an energy efficient home in 1991 for our young family. And by 2005, with an empty nest and increasing concerns that a number of our friends could no longer visit us because of the large number of stairs in our home, we started to discuss whether we should begin the process to downsize to a bungalow. My wife was chair of a city committee and found that 2 members of her committee could not come to meetings at our home because of the stairs. An inner city lot became available very close to where we were living, and we made an offer to purchase it. The offer was finalized a few hours before I entered hospital for open heart surgery. After returning from the hospital, I really came to appreciate the limitations of accessibility following major surgery, and also the weaknesses and the limitations of home care. In starting the process, I came to appreciate that as a consultant working for the city of Edmonton, I had been asked to develop a study on the idea of aging in place, the importance of encouraging the development of a livable community in which affordable and appropriate housing would be available. There would be adequate mobility options and supportive community features to support older citizens. I came to the realization that this was all about my wife and I, and how we were wanting to plan for our future and to move ahead with the idea of aging in place.
Thank you so much, Peter, for sharing your story. And now I'm going to ask Dale to unmute and share with us what made you start your initiation for planning a move.
I was living in a condo by myself, started to feel like the condo was becoming a burden. I wanted to spend my money elsewhere. When I was working, I also realized that I saw a lot of people who didn't make change. Either they had a sudden accident or they just stayed too long in their old home. So I started to first sell my condo, which was an interesting experience because it was, my condo went on the market a week before COVID happened. And it took 6 months to sell. And that time, what I did was look at seniors' residence, and went around the city and looked at 6 or 7 different residences for seniors. I wanted to be prepared in case I needed some sort of support. I'm independent now, but we don't know what the future is going to bring. And my arthritis is getting worse, and at some point I may have to have surgery. So I decided to move into that just in case. I moved in October of last year. COVID was still going on, but the residence was not on full lockdown, so I was able to move in. It's been an interesting experience. We'll talk later.
Thank you so much, Dale. And then I'm going to ask Jeannette to share her experience in regards to moving her mother and what happened to initiate the move and circumstances for them. Please unmute yourself, Jeannette. There we go. Thank you.
Thanks for the reminder. I also want to thank you all for inviting me to be a part of this panel, even though it may have been a little bit of a stretch because this is not my circumstances directly, it is my mother's. I wanted to say that, so the move to long-term care for my mom was not planned. And we only did it because we had to. I have to say that we're Cree, Northern Cree, Sagal Cree, and the way we were raised, and maybe it's not unlike other people, other cultures, is that you don't put your parents or your elders in care. You keep them with you as much as possible. But the reality of our situation is with people working and having other obligations or health issues or other responsibilities in their lives, there's very limited group of people to call on to help with her care. So my mom's situation was that she had had a series of strokes. And so in the last year, from August of last year, 2020 to August of 2021, she'd had 3 strokes. The last stroke was the more serious one. And that, created issues of mobility, inability to care for herself, and also for us as a family to be able to care for her. So the move happened because there weren't any other options. And she was able to live in her own home, a bungalow, because obviously being on one level, my son, Damon, had also lived there with her and helped her. And my siblings, especially my brother, Rocky, and my sister, Linda, we all took turns staying with her. As each time she'd have a stroke and she required more care, we'd go and stay with her for 2 or 3 days and take turns looking after her. But as I said, the last stroke was the severity of it created us to have really no choice but to find a long-term care facility for her in a very short period of time. With COVID, it just added challenges, which I'll speak of soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeannette. So what we've seen in terms of what's initiated moves for everyone is sometimes it's planned, sometimes it's unplanned and unexpected, and sometimes there is a level of expectation of just waiting. We know that change has to happen, but we just don't know what the trigger event will be for that. So thank you all for sharing your perspectives. Our second question that we want to enter into is, what were the biggest challenges for you that you either expected or didn't expect that you had to overcome, either in the planning process for your move and transition, or sort of even just after? What were those initial challenges? So I'm going to start with question 2 here with Peter to start with. So if you can unmute, Peter.
Thank you, Jolyn. The challenges were many. The virtue of planning is you do have opportunity to research what others are doing. And I became very quickly aware that there was very little public understanding about the aging boom on a community level and how it might impact decision-making and service delivery over time. There was inadequate opportunity for public engagement and participation on these issues. There was a lack of political will. It was very difficult to find interest at the local government level to see how we might make communities more livable. I lived with the image that when you get to 65, you're expected to hop on an ice floe and float to Victoria. And the idea of living here and being a valued member of the community doesn't seem to have occurred to us. One of the things that was particularly important for me were the 3 principles of visitability. And this is a word that we hear in terms of aging in place. And it really means 3 things. It means the importance of having a 0-step entry into your house, so there's no stairs. And the second is that all of the exterior doors need to be 36 inches wide. And the third thing is there needs to be a wheelchair accessible bathroom on the main floor. Now, to my surprise, many American cities have accepted that as a planning requirement for modifications to a home or building a new home. And I was visiting Tucson, and I discovered that the city of Tucson had in fact approved the principles of visitability. Now, these are homes that don't have basements, which is the feature of our homes that makes it more difficult. And I discovered a case in Tucson where the home builders of Tucson had taken the city to court and said it was unconstitutional to require someone to spend money on a house, either modifying or building a new house, when they may not ever need to use that particular feature. So the judge said to them, tell me, how much would it cost to modify the home to make it visitable, that anyone should be able to enter any home? And the figure that was quoted was $200. And the judge immediately said, case dismissed, because it was just beyond acceptance that that would be a blockage. So many American cities have moved on this. I'm not aware of too many cities in Canada considering it. A number of us have met with planners in the city of Edmonton when they were working on Blatchford Field, hoping to convince them to make many of those homes visitable and accessible. And it was a terribly difficult struggle. They had all sorts of arguments as to why it couldn't be done, that there were not contractors or builders who were willing to do this. There was concern about it would be more expensive and too expensive. So it's been a lonely struggle, and I'm not sure we're over those challenges yet.
Thank you so much, Peter. Next, we're going to go to Dale to share his challenges with his move.
At first, the biggest challenges was just picking a new place, because Edmonton actually has a large number of seniors residents, and these are residents that provide meals and recreation and a number of activities, plus have supported living. Once I got into the home, the biggest challenge for me was being around so many people. It was something that surprised me a lot, because I had worked in long-term care, I had been a volunteer. I thought, oh, I'm used to that. And I wasn't as used to it as I thought. The moving from living alone to living in a building where there's always people around, it took some time for me to get used to that. The biggest problem was that when I got off isolation, when I moved in, went to the dining room, there were so many people. There were a lot of deaf people speaking quite loudly. It was a huge amount of noise, and it became quite claustrophobic. And that took a while to get over. I thought I had planned. I thought I was ready for it. But the crowd and the noise actually was quite surprising. That has improved since I've been here. I moved in October of last year, and I'm much more used to it now. But I want to remind people when they're in the planning stage to consider some of those other issues that may come up, not just the size of the room or what the activities are, but how are you going to feel with strangers around you. It can be overcome, but I would recommend that people do put that as part of their they're planning. What's it going to be like to actually live in this building? Hopefully you won't regret the move, but be prepared for some unexpected issues and some feelings of, why did I do this? And then the good sense comes back and said, oh, I remember why I did this and it's okay. Thank you.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Dale. Now we're going to go to Joan to share some of her challenges with her moves.
Thank you. Timing, distance, and finances were challenging for me in each instance. The first time was a great rush to accomplish the move before the snow came. In 44 years living up north, I had seen snow every month of the year. While I had more time with the second move, I still wanted to arrive in Edmonton before the snow came. I wished for a mild fall here, and I'm thrilled that my wish has come true. The long distances in each move required reputable long distance movers, and in the second move, interprovincial movers. My grandson was kind enough to pick me up in Victoria, drive me via ferry across the Pacific Ocean and 2 mountain ranges to get safely to Edmonton in mid-September amidst COVID restrictions. The financial resources each time were also a major challenge. House prices were more expensive in Victoria than Dawson Creek with the first move. And with the second move, I had to carry 2 homes for a total year. What made all of these challenges easier to bear was the support I received from friends and family. I also used community resources that are available in the various communities, like charitable organizations and senior center also helped. It also helped that in British Columbia, when the continuing care program was being developed for support for people, I was the leader in Northeastern BC. So a lot of this was very familiar to me. And I think it really helped me in my own personal life to make these moves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joan. And now we'll go to Jeannette to share some of the challenges with the move for her mother.
Thank you, Jolyn. I think the challenges that I alluded to and was in my introduction was especially the tight time frame. So having to move from the hospital and find a long-term care center, especially during the times of COVID restrictions. But I think there was a certain level of denial on our part and on my mom's part as well, but that you do your best to keep her at home for as long as we could, knowing that we would say to each other, we can't keep doing this. I mean, we were exhausted as caregivers, but the reality is we just couldn't keep it up, and we knew that. But we still didn't make the time to research which long-term care places, because in my own heart, I was praying that when mom's time is to go, to cross over, as some of us would say, that she would be able to do that at home. And I wanted it to be on my watch, not my son's watch. I wanted it to be a time, just very simple, no suffering, quick. But of course, you have to, we don't know when our time comes, right? So I think that a little bit of denial and wishful thinking. I think that because we had that short period of planning time, you had to pick 3 long-term care centers because, as most of you know, there was waiting lists at each one of them. You could say whether you preferred a semi-private or private room. We preferred private, and that didn't happen. So I think the reality of the COVID pandemic restrictions were that we couldn't do in-person viewing. So, what you see on the videos on each of their websites, of course, is all wonderful. But in reality, when you're in a situation where you have a shared room, for example, you can't choose the resident who is with you, of course. And so you have to be able to, accept that you can't be by yourself. And I think that was really, really hard for my mom. And it was really, really hard for me as her daughter, and I think as for all of my siblings. So I think that, and also I think the fear for all of us, having just come through most of the pandemic where there would be lockdowns, and I was so afraid something would happen again where we wouldn't be able to see her. And so I was carrying all of those fears. And so all of those challenges in a very short period of time were a lot to contend with. However, I think as a family, we carried it together. And so I think that was really helpful in us having to overcome those challenges. And I also want to just mention really quickly, my mom was really feisty and strong, and she had pounded in our heads that she was going to stay home, and that was it. So I think that added reality of her personality, as much as we love her as she is. There was that, we weren't going to be doing something that she didn't want us to do. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeannette. I think as we've seen for many of our participants, COVID in this past year and a half has added some challenges, but timing and expectations can be challenges, as well as just getting access to the information to make some of the decisions we need to make can be a challenge. So we know time is starting to tick away on us. So for question number 3, just briefly, what were some positives of your move or transition, and were things as you expected? So for this one, I'm going to start with Dale.
The outcome has been actually quite good. I like having a number of activities around that I can choose, recreation and social activities, and but I can choose not to go to them as well. So if I feel like being alone, I can be alone. If I want to be with people, I have that choice. I'm still driving, and so I have more freedom than some of the people. But where I live, there's a lot of very good public transportation and areas to walk in and all of that. So it has been quite a positive experience. And I thought I had it all planned out, and discovered, well, not quite everything. But it's been very good. I'm glad I'm here. And I know that if I do at some point need assistance, that it will be available. So I don't want to do it again, but I'm glad I'm here. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Dale. And now I'm going to go to Joan to share some of the outcomes of her move and what was expected or not for her.
Thank you. I didn't really know what to expect when I moved to Victoria, but it turned out that my 15 years there were very, very good. In Victoria, I chose to live on the Saanich Peninsula that included the populated areas of Sydney, Saanich and Brentwood Bay. And all of this was surrounded by the rural farms that provided our fresh produce. I enjoyed the much milder climate, the year-round gardening, and my ocean view with Mount Baker in the background from my townhouse. My move to Victoria allowed me the opportunity for more traveling and exploring. I became more acquainted with the beauty of the southern half of Vancouver Island, and abroad to Cuba, Mexico, New Zealand, and Nepal. In Victoria, I also met and married my second husband, and we had 6 good years together. It's too early to judge the outcome of my move to Edmonton. However, in the few weeks that I've been here, I've already benefited from building stronger ties with my grandchildren and great-grandchildren. The meals have been pretty good too. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joan. And now we'll go to Peter to share some of the positives and outcomes of his transition to his built home.
I just wanted to touch on two things, if I could, Jolene. One of the questions we had early on, we were going to build a bungalow, and then we realized that the size of the lot and the requirements of bylaws would only allow us to build a 900 square foot bungalow, which wasn't exactly what we had in mind. So we said, we have to go up. How do you go up in a house? Well, you consider including an elevator. So we started a tour of a number of elevator companies, as well as people that I was familiar with who were disabled in a wheelchair and used an elevator in their own home. So we explored with them what the options were. It amazed us that many of the companies we approached said, no, we don't do residential elevators. Yet over the time of the building of our home, which was about 2.5 years, we had a number of contractors who came to us to say, I'm finding there's a number of retired boomers who are wanting to build a new home, and they're asking about elevators, and we don't know anything about elevators. So they came over to see how we had designed ours. So that gives me some hope that what we were doing, others are also pursuing that option. The other thing is I had very good relations with the Faculty of Rehab Medicine. And we have had students every year for 12 years come to our house to look at it in terms of the possibility of how someone might live in a home that was designed this way. Our house was included in the Alberta Ballet House Tour, and we had 1,000 people through our house in over a weekend. And we had students from the Faculty of Rehab Medicine handing out sheets about how you can become better prepared for living and aging in place, continuing to live in your own place. So I think we've made some progress with respect to encouraging others to look at this as an option. And we've learned a lot about the very small details that you have to deal with. And things, one of the statistics that always stays with me is 40% of admissions to long-term care are the result of a fall in or near the home. And tripping on rugs. So you put down a wooden floor and then you say, well, we're going to put down an area rug now because it's too slippery. And then you trip on the area rug and you break a leg and then you're in long-term care. So audits for safety in the home are very important. The importance of good lighting has really stayed with me as an important feature. Making sure that you can see the transition from one form of flooring to another, because that's again where people can trip. So I think we've learned a lot, and we're certainly willing to help others learn. The majority of people who have visited us are people who have discovered that one of the couple has Parkinson's or multiple sclerosis, and they will need to modify their home. So they come and look at our place as an example. But the notion of universal home building is so far away. It is so critical that we start to think about how we build homes for a lifetime, not for a 10-year period, but that's the way we plan it now.
Yes, that's awesome, Peter.
And we can't see the benefit of universal design. What helps an older person helps a child.
Thank you so much, Peter. And now we're going to go to Jeannette to share with her mother's situation what were some expected or unexpected outcomes, and what may have been a positive light in some of it for her.
I just want to say, I want to say that I think this kind of goes back to the challenge, but it was an unexpected outcome, was the space sharing that is extremely challenging, I think, for anyone to be sharing space with a stranger. And in my mom's case, it was a certain level of dementia that she had to deal with it with the onset of those strokes, or onset of dementia with these strokes. So there was fear on her part, one, to be left there in the center, but also she thought that the person that she was sharing space with, she would think it was a man, because and the person was talked a lot through the night, and it was just very, very scary for her. And so I think it was challenging for us to always reassure her, Mom, that's a woman, and you're not alone. The nurses are here, and so a continual reassuring, and at the same time, the reality of there is no barriers in place for her to get off the bed in case she thinks that she can go home. And so there's always the worry of falling because she can't hold her weight anymore. So for us, it was in some ways, I was more fearful daily. And I think it was really hard to every day when she'd say, I want to go home, that reality of having to reassure her, Mom, you can't, and the nurses are here, and all of that. But the positive outcomes, I think, is that my mom is never alone. And I think because she's a social person, there are people that she sees. She's not constantly engaged, but in our family, we still go see her every day. We take turns so that there's always 2 visits from us daily. So we spend a lot of time with her just to keep helping her adjust and help people to know who she is prior to her strokes. So in some ways, there's more freedom for us in a way that we don't have to stay there every few days. But also because we're a musical family, we play music, not just with our mom and for our mom, but we have been playing there at the center. And then other people who live there, I'm going to say the more able-bodied ones, come and join us. And the looks on their faces of happiness that we are singing to them and with them, it just brings joy to your heart. And that my mom's face lights up every time we start to play. And so that has been a really positive situation, I think, for all of us. And I think not just in making her happy, but the other residents. So it's been, and the staff have been wonderful and very supportive. So that part's all good. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeannette. I think what we can see here is you can have the best laid plans, and there will probably either be some hiccups or things you didn't anticipate or were able to plan for, but it still means that an experience can be positive. And so sometimes it's looking for the positivity and trying to find that in a difficult situation. Sometimes it's just realizing that a change can be good. So we want to still leave some time for question and answer. So we're on to our last question for our panelists today. So I really want you to share that one piece of advice for somebody that's thinking of a similar journey to you, or might be in a similar situation to your situation. What would be that advice you would give to somebody else? So I am going to start with Joan this time.
Thank you. I think the first piece of advice is you've got to know yourself. You have to determine what is important to you and try to imagine your future and plan accordingly. And also, what can you afford? Based on all of these reflections, select a location and setting that best suits you. Not perfect, but the best that you can find. And then I can just very briefly, we'll talk about downsizing. You have to decide what you want to take with you when you move. The longer you live, the more you tend to accumulate. And it's a difficult process. I've been through it twice. What I found was what brings me joy. If an item brings me joy, I've got to keep it and find a place for it in my new setting. If it doesn't, I need to take a picture of it for all the beautiful memories it brings, and then pass it along to somebody else. When I moved, I knew I was bringing too much with me, but I wanted to have choices. And my new place is located very close to a charity, and they have benefited from my relocation. And take pictures of what you plan to take with you. It will help you as you sort the boxes and label them and put in the room of where you intend that box to end up. And then take photos of everything and take those photos with you. It will help you in your relocation, and it also will help if something goes astray. And finally, recognize that moving takes a huge amount of energy, physical, mental, and emotional. And don't wait too long to move. Make sure you take care of yourself during the process, setting realistic goals as you go. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joan. And now we'll pop over to Peter for his advice for someone that's in a similar situation.
Thank you very much, Joan. Yes, the thing that I would emphasize as my one piece of advice is that you do really need to be prepared to explore the options, to do the research that's involved, and to be determined about if this was the option you wanted to pursue. My concern is we do not have many home builders or contractors or general contractors who are prepared to design an aging in place home. And we need to have many more of them. We need to have architects who are familiar. We need to have planners that are willing to encourage municipalities to see the benefit of universal architecture and universal design in a home. It's a long, long, lonely struggle, but it's certainly one that I think is worth taking on.
Thank you so much, Peter. And now we'll move to Dale to share his advice.
I think the most important thing is, I'll second what Joan said. Know who you are, know what you need, and take the time to find the right place for you. Particularly in seniors' homes like I live in, independent people often have a lot of time before they move in, and have a lot more choices. Edmonton is fortunate in that we do have a lot of choices for this type of housing. Find the ones that best suit you, and be prepared for the surprises. You've got a lot of things you can research, a lot of places. Find out what you like, find out what you need, how much assistance is going to be needed, if any. Downsize as much as possible. Hopefully we won't have another COVID outbreak. I didn't get to downsize as much as I would have liked. There's a lot of work to do beforehand. And then once you move in, enjoy where you are. Thank you.
Thank you, Dale. And now I'm going to move to Jeannette to share her advice for other family members in the same situation.
Well, as people have said, the importance to plan ahead. And I think for those of you who may be procrastinators, I call myself a junior senior, so I'm 65 coming 66, but the reality of what people are faced with as we age, I think that's helped me to see the importance of planning in advance and not keeping your blinders on and being maybe in denial or wishful thinking that, whatever the situation is that you may wish for, it may not be a reality. So I think be realistic about your budget, about what your needs are. And as I said, plan well in advance. But I also want to say that, encourage people to volunteer at these long-term care centers because they're understaffed, under-resourced. And I see so many people lonely, really lonely people. And so I think that's for all of us to take a certain level of responsibility to try to encourage that out in our communities and with our contacts. So all in all, I think it has been a positive experience. There are some positive benefits, but I think had we planned well in advance, we wouldn't have kind of hit that crisis situation that we did, a month ago. But thank you.
We're so fortunate to have heard so much great information today. What I'm really taking from our panelists at the end of the day is aging in place isn't always about the place. It's about keeping your independence and your safety for as long as possible. And some of the best ways to do that, as we're hearing today, is advanced planning so you can avoid that crisis situation where your family may have to be of more assistance in that time. We're hearing themes of being really self-aware of yourself and your limitations and your expectations and your wants for the future, and to take control of that situation. Because sometimes it takes time to do the research. Sometimes it takes time to pull the resources or to find the availability. So I want to thank all of you today because you each have 4 very different journeys, from building homes to selling homes into retirement living, from just downsizing in general to being in a crisis situation. And I think there's been something for everybody that's participated today to find just one small takeaway. So I thank you all for sharing your stories with us. We are going to open up to questions now. So if you have a question, either a general question or something specific to one of our panelists, I'm going to ask you to type it into the chat window. We have about 7 minutes left before the top of the hour, so we'll do our best to try to get to as many of them as possible. I do have one here in the chat from a participant. I was thinking a model for supportive living could be more like co-housing. Would anyone agree that this would be more home-like, easier to maintain and support? This would also be safer in terms of controlling health outbreaks. Whole other topic, because co-housing definitely is a great feature for aging in place. We just don't have enough experience from COVID to really evaluate all the aftermath, because with co-housing, everybody's sharing a kitchen versus supportive living where there's a commercial kitchen that has more controls and limitations in it. Co-housing is definitely a great option, and through Age Friendly Edmonton, we've definitely had many discussions and different presenters on the topic. So co-housing is definitely another housing option that people can think about. I think that the debate in terms of the safety or best suited is really an individual choice as to what meets their needs best. Secondly, I see a question for Peter. What did you design for the entries on your universal design for northern homes where snow and ice is hazardous at these locations?
Well, the one thing we were lucky in is we had a sloping lot, and this allowed us to build a back entrance to the house where there's a caregiver suite, and we refer to it as that. In the meantime, until we have a caregiver or require a caregiver, we use it for guests. But installing a long no-step entry wasn't difficult at all, and it's just a matter of how you design it and how you think it through. We also made sure that we built gardens that were raised or raised garden beds so that you can garden without having to be crawling along the ground. You can stand next to the bed when you're working on it. So these are all the little tricks that we were trying to think our way through. Our garage is on the main floor, so there's no problem moving into the house from the garage. Next to that is the entrance from the front door, and that is quite easy. And one of the pictures Aging in Edmonton, Age-Friendly Edmonton has used is a picture of a mum coming to my door with a child in the stroller. And when you think of the problem of a cold Edmonton and you come to the stairs and you've got to unload everything, unload the child to take the child up. So again, this just emphasizes how important all of these universal design features can be for all kinds of family members.
Thank you, Peter. I have another question here from the chat. I am 67, but want to plan ahead so I can safeguard my house to be able to stay in my own home. What resources are available as ideas? And I think, you know, kind of tying into Peter's conversation a bit is it's important to start understanding universal design and evaluating your own home and what works and what doesn't work. As Peter's alluded to, I work with a lot of clients in their homes planning for aging well, and our Edmonton traditional homes are not designed very well for aging well at all, and that's a sad truth. So for those that really want to age in place, it is about planning and understanding what works and doesn't work in your home. Do you have to change the stairways or put in ramps? Do you have to widen doorways? Do you need to make sure all your services are on one level in your home? So kitchen, bathroom, bedroom, laundry, all on that main level that you can access. Do you need to put in walk-in showers, zero entry showers instead of bathtubs? Universal design, as Peter can attest to, is there's hundreds of little details that can be a part of your home. And so my advice for anyone that's wanting to stay at home is do the research, do the quotes with qualified contractors to know what the costs are to have those changes done, because sometimes those costs outweigh the reality versus making a move to some place that is accessible. So if you know the limitations of your home in advance, it gives you the time to look for something in your neighborhood to keep that same community, or the time to do the renovations. Because I can promise you, if you land in hospital with a surgery and need that accessibility and you haven't put in the planning or the renovations, you don't have time in the couple of days before you get discharged. So I know that it's tough to address that all in one conversation. We'll definitely have to do something soon. I've got another quick question here for Jeannette. Has your experience with your mom in any way impacted your cultural perspective on caring for your parents at home? And we just have a minute and a half here, Jeannette. So if you can quickly respond to that.
I think to some extent, I look around at the residents that are in long-term care, and I have to be honest, I don't see people of color there. And so, but there are people of color who are the workers. So I think to some extent there is that consideration. I think that that was always kind of in the back of my mind of trying to find a place where the fit would be really good for my mom. But I think overall, I wouldn't say that there's really a cultural barrier in the space where she's at for a variety of reasons. And I think we do our best in our family to bring the essence of, I'm going to say, spirit of your heart in that space, because I think sometimes people tend to see residents not necessarily as they would see their own loved ones, but I think it's like you bring that reminder in the space wherever you are. So I always say, bring all of you wherever you go. So I'm not sure that I answered that question, but yeah, overall, I think that there were no significant cultural barriers. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you to our panelists today, and I'll pass it over to Beth for final words.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jolene. Thank you so much to all our other panelists as well. We're right on the dot at 1 o'clock here, and I know people probably have to get going. So I just wanted to apologize to those that didn't get their questions answered. If you do have a burning question, send it to agefriendly@edmonton.ca, and we will do our best to get you a response as soon as possible. We'll also be sending out an attendee survey in the next day or so, and we really encourage you to complete it as it helps us to plan for future Lunch and Learns. And on that note, please do keep an eye out in your inboxes for information related to our future Lunch and Learns, which will be focused on health and well-being of older adults. And enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much.